Prime Minister Johnson, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it very much, sir.
My pleasure.
The United Kingdom has donated to the COVAX initiative. You say that you plan to yourself donate more vaccine when you have it. I wonder when you intend to do that, and will that be a conversation at the G7 when richer nations should start donating more of their vaccine surplus?
You bet. And we want to do some more bilaterally, and don't forget, we've ordered about 580 million doses of vaccine just last year in the spring of last year. We put in contracts which will mean that we get obviously large quantities of surplus vaccine that we'll want to be using by the end of the year around the world. But don't forget that what the UK has already done is we worked with AstraZeneca to ensure that they sell their vaccine, they distribute their vaccine at cost around the world. So that means it's by far the cheapest option. It's the option that's easiest to use around the world. And I think we've put about $1 billion into supporting COVAX ourselves. But what we want from the G7 is an agreement to go further. And so we'll be looking and I know that President Biden, I know that Prime Minister Trudeau is also very keen on this, as well as Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. And we'll be looking to come up with some big numbers, because after all, nobody is safe until everybody is safe. And what we want the G7 to try to agree is that instead of vaccinating the whole world by 2024 or 2025, which is the current, what we'd achieve on the current timetable, we need to get this done by the end of next year, by 2022.
Okay. You mentioned AstraZeneca there, which has become certainly the workhorse for your country. In this country, we have paused the use of AstraZeneca on first doses due to concerns around blood clots. Our advisory science table has said that mRNA vaccines are preferred. Do you think that there is too much caution around the use of AstraZeneca, given the success we've seen in your country?
I'm going to rely wholly on our medical health authorities, the regulatory authority. They look at this stuff very carefully. They take a very prudential, a very precautionary approach, and they've given us the go-ahead. And we think that overwhelmingly the benefits for people lie in getting vaccinated. And actually, if you look at what's happening in the UK. I think Canada also is very progressive on vaccines, yes. And you've got high rates of take up, and everybody sees that it's the vaccination program that is really the way forward, and it's that vaccination program that's driving down the numbers of infections.
So Canadians who might be worried about AstraZeneca here, what would you say to them?
I would say that obviously they should follow the medical and the scientific advice, but the scientific advice that we have is that it's a very, very valuable dose, and its benefits are very considerable.
I want to ask you about President Biden's investigation into the origins of COVID-19 and the notion that it potentially was leaked from a lab in Wuhan. What is your position on how much further that needs to be investigated, based on what you've been told?
Well, I've got an open mind on this, but I'll be clear with you. So far, the stuff I've seen does not suggest that the number one candidate for this is a lab leak, right? So the stuff I've seen suggests that at the moment, the number one suspect for the origin of this disease is still a zoonotic disease that occurred as a result of the farming of wild animals in some way. That's what our people still think. That's, I think, what the World Health Organization thinks. But I'm not going to exclude any possibility. I'm reading a lot of interesting stuff at the moment about the possibility that there was some virus escape from a lab. I think we've got to keep an open mind.
One of your former aides, Dominic Cummings, this week testified at the inquiry into how you handled COVID. I know you've responded to it in some way. He said that you initially thought it was a scare story and that you wanted to be injected with the virus live on TV. I don't know if you want to, first of all, just say whether any of that's true, because it obviously got a lot of international headlines, but also maybe reflect on whether you should have and could have done more, given the number of people that died in the United Kingdom.
I think everybody, perhaps I can answer your question in this way, just by reflecting on the immensity of the decisions that everybody has had to take in all our governments, and the huge difficulties that we've faced, and the choice of when and how and whether indeed to go into a lockdown, to curtail people's freedoms in a very radical way, in a way that hasn't happened even in wartime, in living memory. That's a very big thing to do, particularly when you look at the effects on young people, on their mental health. You look at the loss of livelihoods, of earnings, of people's loss of education, which is very, very hard to repair. Though we are making a huge effort now. That's a big decision. Sure. And a difficult decision to take. You've got to balance that with the horror of the pandemic, its incredible ability to spread, its contagiousness, and you've got to try to come to the right conclusions. We did everything we could to minimize casualties, to save life, and to protect the NHS. That was our national health service. And you know what? I think that's what governments around the world tried to do. With very, very few exceptions, they were facing the same types of choices and trying to make the same types of decisions.
Can I ask you about vaccine passports in terms of the G7? Our Prime Minister certainly says that he wants to have a conversation about that. But I wonder, given that there are different vaccines approved in different parts of the world, what you think that conversation has to be like, and whether you should exclude some vaccines from those passports entirely.
That's a very, very interesting question. I think we need to have some sort of, that's one of the reasons that the G7 were trying to get a kind of global, or the beginnings of a global agreement on pandemics and pandemic preparedness. And it's one of the issues, by the way, where Justin Trudeau and I, or Canada and the UK, are, as so often, in glutinous harmony. Your viewers will be distressed to know we agree across a huge range of things. Well, if you look at what happened in the world in 2020, it was a terrible year for humanity, and it was a terrible year for the international system. It was a terrible year for believers in global cooperation, because the world simply became balkanized, and everybody was sauve qui peut. Everybody hung on to their stocks of PPE, of protective equipment. Everybody, you've seen how the world's found it very difficult to share medicines, to share vaccines. And in the end, we've got to do better than this. We've got. I've made the point earlier that no one is safe until everyone is safe. Vaccination has got to be a global enterprise. We've got to make sure that fighting the next pandemic is also a global enterprise. And that means when it comes to things like vaccine passports, which you particularly raise, that we have the same protocols and the same understanding about what works and what doesn't work. If you remember, we've all been, for the last year, everybody's been setting different standards, different approaches for quarantine, for lockdowns. It was like a Tower of Babel moment. You remember in the Bible, I think it might be in Genesis. There's a moment when humanity is suddenly scattered into confusion after trying to build the Tower of Babel. That was what happened with the arrival of COVID.
So there has to be some sort of...
We were all split up. We went our several ways.
So there has to be some sort of agreement then at the G7 level to start on how travel is and vaccine.
Yes. What we need, I think, is a global treaty on pandemic preparedness. And to go back to the question the excellent question you were asking about the origins of the disease, we need zoonotic research hubs. Yeah. We need to know where the new zoonotic diseases might be arising. We need to have a global network of surveillance for pandemics. We need to have rules so that there can be no interruptions of supplies across borders, so that we have secure supply chains for the things that we depend on in future. And clearly we need to have agreements on issues such as vaccine passports, COVID status certification, and the rest.